everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to 19.2 Launch Week and our first 19.2 webinar, What's New in WinForms. In today's session, without a doubt, the biggest news is support for Dotnet Core 3, but technical evangelist Paul Usher and CTO Julian Bucknall have more to show for the DevExpress WinForms product line. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later today. We will also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in your GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Paul and Julian.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Launch Week. It actually feels that we're getting earlier in the year for this particular launch. What are your thoughts, Julian? Oh, and good morning to you.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning, everybody. Yes, we've been trying over the past couple of years to release, especially the second major release of the year, well before Christmas. So obviously there's Christmas holidays, and in the US there's Thanksgiving as well. So it always made it rather difficult to release later in the season, shall we say, rather than earlier. So here we are, end of October. We released on Friday version 19.2, and here we are this week going to be talking about the new features in that major release. So obviously the next major release will presumably be before May next year. We'll see. But
yeah, like adding pressure.
But still the usual 6-month in between major release thing, but we're just trying to make it a little earlier for the end of the year.
Now we've got a huge week of presentations, including another 3 from you and I. We've got the ASP and web technologies from Mahul and Don coming up. We've got Mark sharing some Code Rush love this week as well. And of course, some, lots of stuff going on. So if you're not already registered, jump on after this presentation and get your place secured. Now there's about 53 points that we're going to go through today.
about 53.
Approximately. It depends.
You ran out of fingers.
I did. There's some in-depth stuff. There's some high-level stuff. Not everything has a demo, but we will talk through it. And of course, the first thing we want to do is talk about the elephant in the room.
Yes, Amanda mentioned it, and it's bang in the middle of that particular slide. It's Dotnet Core 3. The big thing about Dotnet Core 3 was the support for WinForms and WPF. And in version 19.2, we've added Dotnet Core 3 support to our own WinForms controls and WPF controls. So we'll talk about that, the WPF side, on Wednesday. But I'm sure you're all very aware of what Dotnet Core is all about. The biggest problem at the moment, is it a problem? Yes, I suppose it is a problem. Problem at the moment is the designer in Visual Studio 2019 still does not support designing for .NET Core 3. So in essence, I presume you'd have to design it for not .NET Core 3. And once you've designed your app, recompile targeting .NET Core 3. All I can say at the moment is our controls fully support .NET Core 3. So we can participate in that kind of application. And the biggest thing about the desktop support in .NET Core 3 is, of course, you can ship .NET with your application and just install it into its own folder. You don't have to worry about the version of .NET on your user's machine. It's all going to be separate and self-contained and ready to run, basically.
So like it was 20 years ago when .NET
came. Indeed, I came from the Delphi era, so yeah, just like Delphi, really.
And the other thing, just picking up on that, Julian, is you mentioned that there's no designer support for WinForms. So in other words, we're making WinForm designers more like web designers now these days.
I presume so. The designer is in preview mode, So if you're willing to try it out, obviously we have to keep up with what Microsoft are producing with regard to the designer. So just be warned, things won't work, but certainly try the preview. We do.
.NET Core 3.0 is supported across our platforms, which is the core or the real information that we want to deliver at that point.
Exactly.
Let's go back to looking at what's new in version 19.2, and we'll start with the new control. What I'm going to do, all the demonstrations today will be run from the DevExpress Demo Center, including the diagram one, which we'll see inside some code as well. The Demo Center is installed by default when you install version 19.2, which of course is already available from your downloads area. Now the Gantt control is technically still under CTP. We did see earlier versions of it previously, and it's come a long way since then. One of the first things you'll notice is how clean the look and feel is, and part of that is attributed to the implementation or the inheritance of the tree list control. And we'll be looking at some of the new things for the tree list control later. We can see that we've got the tree on the left, which supports things like full collapse, expand, and we can see that on the right hand side we've got the multiple different types of tasks. So we've got a summary task, normal task, milestone. In essence, the Gantt control provides some powerful data binding. You've got the multiple task types, the ability to control working days and or holidays with exceptions inside those collections. You can configure the task appearance and options. You've got full timescale customization, including out-of-the-box scrolling. I'm just holding the control key down at this point and scrolling in and out of that timescale. You've got printing options. We had some people provide feedback on the blog post as to it's an imperative that we have printing out of the box. It's already there. We've also got DirectX hardware acceleration for fast performance. Now remembering this, it is CTP, but there is a lot of functionality built in. I'm going to switch to the documentation in a second after I give you a quick look at a couple of the coded examples. It's always interesting how when you start adding people to GoToWebinar that things start to grind to a halt here. With the presentation a number of times and everything was working beautifully, so we'll see how this goes. What we've got, I'm going to start with the data binding. We can see the code in the bottom once it refreshes. So there is a data source that was provided with the Gantt control. Effectively you set up the mappings of the field names and then assign your collection to that. And if I look at the task code, we can see it's a nice simple collection here, just of what you'd expect. An ID, a name of a task, start, stop, duration. You can provide start and duration. We calculate end time based on holidays and so forth, as well as other fields such as progress that you may want to use. We can see that if we want to draw a critical path, we can take over or start to use things like e-cut. Here we've got an example of utilizing some of the built-in colors in the DX Skin colors collection for background and progress. We can also see how we can custom draw task dependencies. Some nice examples of how to split a task. So you might have a task that starts and stops on a particular date and you can represent that, or you may just want to display something like a deadline on the chart itself, and we can see that that gets drawn in through there. I did mention that I'd switch through to the documentation because there's a lot of information actually already on the documentation page. We can see everything from the overview, stepping through the data source, how to understand the tree and chart areas, all about the tasks, the dependencies, and so forth. So work through all of those options. It is a great little control. I particularly am passionate about Gantt charts and project management, so I've been playing around with that. Julian's going to add some kind of warning saying it's not released, be careful with it. But
indeed, it is a CTP. Just to warn you, it is a CTP, Community Technology Preview, so it is not finished. I wouldn't use it in a production environment, but certainly try it out. Obviously, now we've got it as a CTP. It will be released pretty quickly, I would say, probably within the next major milestone. And oh my word, I've just used a Gantt chart bit of terminology there. But yes, so play around with it for sure, and by the time you ascertain what it does, just do it. Yeah, there we go.
Next, I want to look at the new control, which is the SVG Image Box. Effectively, it's a huge control. It's the picture box on steroids, specifically designed to maximize productivity with SVG images. I'm going to show you a couple of examples. One is the one baked into the demo center. Imagine you're working on a cinema ticket sales application for your national cinema, and you want to be able to select seats as part of that sales process. Simply add an SVG image of your seat layouts and allow people to click the seat they want to sit on. You can see that it supports hot track, so as I'm moving over elements, it's actually doing that. What's really, really cool about this control is the fact that this is just a straightforward SVG image that I can add so much functionality to without a lot of effort. And so what I'm going to do is switch through to Visual Studio now and just give you a quick overview of how that works. I've got a blank project. I'm going to look for my SVG item in the toolbox. Don't get it confused with the SVG image collection. Drag the SVG image box onto the canvas. I'm going to say Doc in Parent, and then I'm going to choose an actual image. I downloaded a couple today when I was playing around. One was a seat mapping of an Airbus, the other was a cruise ship, and since I prefer to cruise instead of fly, I'm going to use this. You'll notice here if there's any issues loading in the element, then you're going to get a little message box just advising what might be missing. Click OK. At this point I could play around with sizing modes, clip, squeeze, stretch, zoom. I'm going to leave it at clip, because what I want to do is actually just show you how easy it is to add hot tracking, add other visual elements, and even a click event around things. So if I'm building this cruise liner info application, I might want that when I click on a cabin, I get something to happen. Well, using the customize option here, I can invoke the editor, and you'll notice that the SVG is made up of all these different elements, hence the fact that it's a vector item and is comprised of these items. I just want to come along and select this item, which is a rectangle, and on the right hand side I've got these options, and I'm going to play around with the hovered. I'm going to say when I hover I want the border to have a thickness of 1, and I don't want to fill, and when it's selected I want to have a fill color of yellow. I could obviously come through and select multiple elements, so I could choose a bunch here and set those same properties. We might choose a different color. Somebody's neighborhood dog's getting friendly. Selected, and a fill color, if I was to choose it, of, I don't know, orange. We can see visually what's going to happen here, and that's fine. And just to give you an idea, I'm going to update the tag property, and you can work with an ID property or the tag property. I'm going to call this R2580, and then the next one being R2584, just for simplicity. I'm going to click OK, and that's my mapping of that SVG image. All that's left for me to do is to bring up the properties window and come to the events, come down to the item click. Now you can see there's a lot of properties available, a lot of different things. Here's an event that I created earlier. Quickly jump into code, and we can see that all that event is doing is checking to make sure that the tag's not null, so I don't throw an exception for clicking on the wrong thing, and then just show you a message box. So no other code involved. I'm going to run the example, and then I want to see what happens. What Julian and I have been talking about and what the team are most excited about is where you guys are going to utilize this power of this control. And as I move down, you can see that the first element, which was 2580, and then the different color as I move through the others, so the white versus the horrible pinky. And if I click on the box, I'm going to get that message box returning that element information. So super easy from a implementation perspective, and it is just going to be mind-blowing to see what you guys and ladies come up with. Moving on now to the data grid. Sorry, before I do that, the SVG documentation has got absolutely everything you need about how to implement that. It's got examples, it's got some of the properties, how to set things up, the root items, it shows you how to use the API to do the finds across strings, across tags, ancestors, you name it. Very comprehensive documentation on how to get started with that control. So hit the document center for that. Data grid. First thing we want to show inside the data grid is the integration of the search and group panel. Great option for streamlining the amount of UI that's being used or real estate that's being used. We can see with the table view here that I've got a grid, I've got my column header available, and I've got the ability of dragging that into there as normal. I mean, I could drag others, just the usual functionality we'd expect. What you'll also notice, with or without the grouping, is that I've got the search box, which of course can be invoked with a shortcut key as well. And as I look for apples, it's going to find apples. Obviously there's the records. I can ungroup. The search box is still showing. So it's a great use of that real estate. Now if you do want to or need to, you can revert to the separate panels simply by setting the find panel location property to group panel. Some other things for the data grid, we've got the group row context menu now available, and you can interact with that using the pop-up menu showing event. You can utilize checkbox selection for banded and advanced banded grid views. You've got the display selection checkboxes in group rows within a data bound mode now, and also copy to clipboard has a new event, which is clipboard row copying. And you can use that to modify the clipboard data and prevent certain rows from being copied to the clipboard. So almost like a redact option for that data. We've added drag and drop support between the tile view and grid view. The edit form now has the ability to allow you to execute custom actions after the form has been closed, and that applies to both the grid view and tile view. And you can actually convert filter criteria to filter values for the Excel style filter menus. Now there is a new event. I'm going to try and get through it all in one breath, Julian, which is a filter of Excel pass filter criteria to allow you to do that.
Very good.
And with that, I'm going to take a break and hand over to you for some charting.
So with regard to the charting capabilities within WinForms, we've added a couple of new charts. The first one is the Waterfall Chart, and this basically helps you visualize changes in values across a timeline, and the timeline has basically separate steps. And as we see here, the global carbon balance. So we're sort of showing if you like, a line chart or anything like that. We're showing increases in one color and decreases in another color. So an increase in the carbon footprint is red, and a decrease in the same footprint will be green. So good versus bad, as it were. And obviously here we're showing some individual important times. So we have the various protocols happening here, and so they're shown as individual bars. It's a great way of visualizing those changes over a particular time. So your values have to be, if you like, separate. It's not a continuous line or bar chart or anything like that. It's just a great new way of doing it. And we can even show detailed data where we're going to stack some bar charts individually. So we still have the same timeline, but we're showing individual items within each of those bars originally. And so you still get the same flow of information of the waterfall, if you like, but here we're showing stacked bars to show the individual pieces and how they're changing. So that's the waterfall chart. Next up is one for you statisticians. It's the box plot chart. Basically helps you visualize data distributions with well, we're calling it a summary functions, a set of summary functions. Basically, we have 6 of them. We have the minimum and maximum. We have the mean, which everybody understands. We have the median, and then we have the first quartile and the third quartile. So 6 different calculated values from your data shown as this new box plot. If anything falls outside the maximum minimum, they're shown as outliers with a small circle. But it's almost like the candlestick chart that we have for financial charts, but with more information. As I say, great for statisticians. For the rest of us, it's like, whoa, pretty. But, maybe you like it, maybe you don't. The chart toolbar has several enhancements now. The chart toolbar gives you a quick way of adding functionality to your charts for the users. You can switch a series view, you can draw Fibonacci indicators, you can plot some technical indicator on a separate pane if you need to, change the measurement unit for the argument axis or the x-axis, adjusting a visible data range. So there's lots of different types of enhancements you can add to your chart toolbar. You can hide unnecessary commands or the ones which aren't used. You can rearrange the UI elements or the buttons as we have here. While we're showing this particular example, there's a new resizing of panes. So, in a sense, you don't have to get it exactly right. Your user can resize an interesting pane to suit what they're trying to visualize from a chart. So that's now available at runtime. We've added scroll bar annotations if you have a scroll bar. So basically important information that you want to show from within your scroll bar rather than within the chart, strips, constant lines, pane annotations, serious point annotations, custom axis labels. And to cap it all off, there's a new default appearance to our charts, which is based on the new basic skin, which Paul will be showing in a moment, in a quarter of an hour or something like that. So charting, we'll be talking a little bit more about with regard to charting in our dashboards and mine's gone blank. Dashboards and analytics reporting. That's it. Webinar on Friday morning. So we'll talk a little bit more about that then.
Absolutely. And it never ceases to amaze me as to the power that is going into some of those charts. Like I struggle with some basics sometimes. So,
But remember, charting is all about visualization of data. Yeah, you can show the data in a grid, big deal. Charting is all about how to express the information in that data in such a visual way that your users understand what is showing and then can act upon it.
So in other words, a pie chart.
Yeah, if you're making pies.
I'm going to run the diagram demo up from inside Visual Studio. I've been having some issues with my resolutions on my virtual machine, so that's the only reason I'm doing it this way. Before I do that, the accordion control has a new custom draw hamburger button event, which allows you to custom draw the button. We were joking before. Julian thought it should be a cheeseburger or something similar.
Bacon burger. Come on, bacon.
And then we just start talking about Uber Eats, but no, we've got to focus. You can also set the pop-up form auto height mode on the accordion control and use the close pop-up form method to programmatically close the form. I love it when method names are easy to digest like that.
Mm-hmm.
Moving to the diagram control, there is a new automatic layout algorithm for the org chart. I'm just going to switch the org chart here. In essence, it visualizes roles and relationships with an entity such as company department. And we can see it's not the one that I wanted. Where's the other org chart? There we go. Just think there's more than one option, Julian.
Yeah, indeed.
We can see here that we have a typical tree layout at the top for the CEO, managers, and down to the next team. But then as we start getting down, we're using what's known as a tip-over algorithm for the other items. We've also introduced updates for the connector labels. And just to make sure I get to the, I'm going to use the data diagram, I think, on this one. And in essence, we can now have 4 text labels to a connector. You can have 2 labels at the start point and 2 labels at the end point. The API includes begin left, begin right, and left, end right, and begin label arrow offsets. So that makes it nicer for being able to annotate your connector lines a little differently. We're going to jump over to the data editors, switch back here, and data editors. I usually jump into data grid editors at this point. Now there is a new mode in the lookup edit and the grid lookup edit controls. It's basically a new user-friendly search option. Scroll to auto suggest. And we can see that in the delivery field here, I'm going to type in Berlin, beautiful part of the world. Oh, look, there's 2 in the States, and a new Berlin. What's happening here is something different to the traditional lookup binding. It's not bound to some static database that we then have to go off and minimize the return and do all that sort of stuff. It's actually utilizing a new event. I'm going to show you something else that you may not be aware of as I explain this through, and that's this show code option inside the demo suite. If I click this, any element that's on the page that's got custom code that we want to show as your demo will be highlighted. So you can see nothing else there. When I click on this, you're going to see the cool example of what's going on, including a link through to documentation. It is a great way to learn about some of these things without having to try and wade through all of the code of the demo to get there. But as you can see here, the auto suggest method gets fired. We have a animation timer set. We've then got the highlight ranges. But what's important here is this asynchronous call going off to actually collect some data and display from what we want. It doesn't have to be bound to a specific data set at that point. So it certainly allows you to provide a more user-friendly approach. And again, from reading the comments on the blog post, it's something that a lot of you have been excited about. So there's already that traction happening and the conversations back and forth with the teams. Next, we've got the auto search mode in the lookup editor, which extends what functionality that used to provide in terms of unlocking that field as well. There's a new control. Well, technically it's not a new control. It is an enhancement to an existing control. I'm going to jump down to the mask box to demonstrate it. And it's the implementation of the time span object inside the, here we're going to look at as a mask. Well, we've got all the standards, so we've got the constant formats. We can see applying the mask over here. We've got the typical autocomplete. Now this comes in two flavors basically. You've got time span and time span with advancing caret as a mask, which allows the users to enter the time intervals, and obviously the one with the advancing mask will move automatically. You've got the typical mouse and keyboard support, very easy to get to and from each of those elements. But what I particularly like is how it can be used inside a custom mask. So here we've got the thing saying 14 days left. I can just skip up and down. We can see the mask itself is showing the input character and then DD for days and then left. And I could come up here and say to release. Oops, I've got to spell it correctly first. And I can say, oh look, there's 5 days to release, Julian.
No, -3. It happened on Friday. There we go.
And we can
I must admit, I do like the way that the static text does not change and you can't edit it, but it gives Absolutely. You that, that nice feel to the input field anyway.
It feels really, really polished at that level, and it supports negative numbers. Obviously, that's what we're demonstrating with the -3. But as you say, I can't type anything but a number there, and it just looks clean. So another good addition. Next, we're going to take a look at mapping. One of the big items for maps this release is the heat map. I'm going to come down, select heat map, and what we can see here is the seismic density across the world, effectively showing the hot points of seismic activity. And of course, coming down the west, it is west, I got it right this time, yay.
Yes,
the west
west
of the US, with the San Andreas fault line, etc. We can see all down through Brazil. We can see very little through that first part of Europe, and then as I come across to Asia Pacific, the Pacific Rim of Fire, where obviously there is a lot of activity, especially down through the New Zealand area. Kia ora, my friends. What I do find interesting is that Australia, being such a big island, has very little seismic activity. So now with this particular feature, you can increase or decrease your point radius to give you a smoother, or I don't know what term I'd really use there, but you can control the...
I suppose it's a more detailed view of those seismic activities. I do like this particular example because it does show the tectonic plates on the Earth, basically, the various plates as they move around.
And you can switch between the default palette, a hot palette, and a cold palette to get different things. And we were talking before, because there's some horrific fires obviously happening in the west of the US at the moment, and also some in Australia, to be fair. But it would be interesting just to see how that would pan out on something like this as well. So there's, I think, quite a few different use case scenarios for the heat map provider. We also have the in-memory image tile provider. Now this allows you basically to display any custom tile images without the need to actually have them saved locally. So you can load an image that's being create at runtime from just about any source, and it's simply a matter of creating a bitmap for each tile-based indices. Now what I mean by that is, as I jump in and out, you should be able to see just the way that maps are represented are based on those little tiles. There's also the gradient mode for color scale legend, which when you set to true will allow you to create a gradual blend between legend items. Jump over and give the pivot grid some love. Now with the pivot grid, again, some people use it all the time. It's got a big place for some. And one of the key things in this update is the pivot grids optimized calculation engine. Now this engine has been applied across WinForms, it's been applied across WPF and ASP.NET. I'm going to jump down to the code examples to talk about the new aggregate function, which, as the phrase gives it away, aggregates data with a specific summary function against a specific set of dimensions. And we can see that inside a couple of these API or code examples. We'll see that you can add this aggregate function with the specific set of dimensions. There's a couple of other examples there. Again, reference, there's a lot of information on the help file or documentation site. One thing I will point out is this property. So data processing engine is set to optimized. For that and for the new window calculations that have been added for this version, so running totals, moving calculations, rank difference, percent of totals, and even custom window expressions all require that you have that new optimized engine selected. There's also changes to the way data access is done. So you've got direct data access in client mode. So it utilizes the in-storage memory for frequent calculations. There's also a direct data access in client mode option, but you cannot use that if you're using the pivot grid in legacy mode. And then finally, in the filter option, which is you'll find at the lower of the panel, you now have access to an MRU or most recently used filter list. Let's talk range control. By range control,
this was an intriguing one, I must admit. When I first saw it, I thought, I'm sure we had this before. I'm sure we had this before.
And you would be familiar, or you would be correct in thinking you've seen something similar, particularly in our dashboard components. And that's the date time range. So this is the standard range control with a date time range that can now be set. It basically allows you to visualize the date range that can be selected. So I can come in here and choose that, etc. Looking at example number 2, it shows clearly that you can optimize or change the visualization and provide custom draw events. It supports multiple rulers and is a great way to allow you to add a date selection within your WinForm application. So I think definitely seen it on dashboards, and there's lots of places that it could be used as well. Next, we're going to jump through to the ribbon, bars, and dock UI. Couple of enhancements inside the docking area. So I'm going to jump down to dock panels. And the first thing I'm going to do is just drag and drop my panel to the left here. We can see the hints that pop up showing all the available indicators or spaces that can be docked to. And if I drag dock panel 2, I'm going to drop it, and we can see that there we've got 2 panels, similar to what you see inside of Visual Studio Windows. There's now a new option for docking to the center of the parent container, so I'm going to drag this one again. And again, you can see from the, as I move between the hints, drop to center, and it's going to fill that area. You can now also hide or display the backstage view at design time using the smart tag. You can adjust the offset between the bar edit items caption and any editors. You can apply a foreground color to custom ribbon categories, and the ribbon groups caption button is now hidden by default. The other thing you do is activate the ribbon search menu via shortcut. Let's talk all things rich text. Now, this next couple of examples, well, one I'm definitely going to be able to show you, the other we're going to talk about for a second, and that's to do with hyphenation. We'll apply a dictionary that contains the necessary hyphenation attributes in the dictionary, you can now apply that to your rich text document. What would happen? You've assigned a dictionary, you come across the page layout, and the hyphenation dialog or selectors would be available, and that can be toggled between none. You can do automatic hyphenation, which again is based on that dictionary attribute, and also allow the users to insert hyphens themselves using the ribbon UI and or a shortcut. Now the big thing for me with the rich text control has got to be inside the review tab, and that is tracking changes. This is a big one. We've seen previously we've been able to do comment editing, manipulation. Now we've got full support for change tracking. And that is cool. I'm just going to activate and say show all markup at the moment, and we can see the element that was removed and what was automatically added in. This is great when you're doing, obviously, sharing a document between multiple people to see who has edited what, who's got the ability of accepting changes, who's got the ability of rejecting those changes. There are a couple of limitations at the moment, such as this coloring can't be set via the UI, but it can be set at an API level, and it doesn't currently support ODT or the Open Document format, but obviously it does support the other standards. And then for Rich Text Editor, we've now added theme font support, which is basically themes. So they generally contain two sets of elements. You've got headers and body, and we've added support for that, which is set at a document level. Keeping my eye on the clock, Julian.
Yep. Spreadsheet.
53 is a lot to get through.
As I say, I've run out of fingers. I keep on going.
Now you tricked me because you said spreadsheet, but I don't want to do spreadsheet. I want to do scheduler.
Okay, scheduling.
We're going to save the best for last. So scheduler now implements the resource categories and Office-inspired tabs. What I'm going to do, first of all, is show you the group by category. So now you can activate the group by category feature, and you'll see the change on screen switching between a standard view and then actually separating into columns. I'm going to switch down to the tab view. Julian absolutely loves this view.
I think this is the best thing we've done in a while. Let's put it like that. I just love the fact that you can now show the individual resources or whatever as individual tabs rather than, you know, kind of stuck in one header.
Absolutely. And you can still switch to the traditional or the old format, and it's a matter of those tabs look a lot more outlooky.
They look a lot, yeah, they look neater. You know, you don't have to show everything in one go, kind of thing. I think it's brilliant.
One note. Almost. Next thing I want to show on this particular one, I'm going to turn the group by category off, and we've added support for HTML markup inside the events or the appointments, whatever you want to call them. I'm just going to manually add this in. Obviously, normally you'd be doing this elsewhere. But the other thing I'm going to draw your attention to is the fact that we also now support subscript and superscript markup. So I'm going to add this little superscript tag to my distributor. I'm going to add bold to my conference room. We also got support in that HTML formatting for a font tag, allowing custom font names and attributes to be applied. So that's pretty cool. And we can see now I've got my allow HTML text. To turn that off, standard just showing you the markup. And here we can see the superscript and the bold coming through, which is pretty cool. Inside the recurrence pop-up, we've added the functionality now for yearly recurrences, which allow every N number of years. It could be every 4 years. We're doing the Olympics. It's going to be every 4 years. Send me a reminder. And it can be every and either month on a specific day or the last first, etc., day of the week or a specific day of the month. So a powerful option there for adding annual occurrences. Maybe my dentist or my optician should use that. You talked before about skins. We have added a new skin, which is the default for all our WinForms controls now, and that is the DevExpress basic skin. It's a vector-based skin. Julian
Hooray!
goes, yay.
Hooray! Hooray! I do this every time, I must admit, but you've got to go vector with your applications, just like on the web. SVG and vector images, icons, much better than your bitmaps. Okay, that's my...
Yes. Soapbox over.
And okay,
now we've got the basic skin with 6 different color options or variations, palettes, whatever you want to call them. And we've also added to the list the Office 2019 black, white, and dark gray options. So that's the skins. I did open the spreadsheet before, so I'll save some time there. And spreadsheet. 19.2 introduces support for Excel binary workbook, so XLSB. Yay, everybody's screaming. Which also means, effectively, that's the BIF12 format. We've also added support for BIF5, which means we've got compatibility with Excel 5 and Excel 95 workbooks, which is obviously a great milestone to meet. The other cool thing added into version 19.2 is the status bar. We can see that we've got the support for Zoom, but more importantly, or just as important, if I highlight a bunch of cells, automatic status information can be shown, such as the sum, max, min, numerical count, physical count, and average values. We've also enhanced the column width calculation for printed workbooks, which pretty much mimics or closely mirrors, I'll be careful, the output with that of Microsoft Excel. Now that is only available if you've got the new spreadsheet layout engine actually selected. There's a couple of changes for the tree list control. I've already shown one of those inside the Gantt control. Obviously it inherits tree list. And that is the edit form pop-up is now available, and entire branch filter mode. So it actually allows you to list matching nodes with associated parents and children. And of course the full collapse expand that I showed. We've got support for high DPI, which is another standard. Well, we've got support for another standard that Microsoft have produced, which is known as the per monitor V2. Now, when I was doing some research into high DPI support, there's all sorts of weird stuff goes on, but per monitor V2 is a standard that has to be adhered to, and that's basically allowing for different monitors to have different scale factors and that the controls scale differently based on what monitor they're on. Now, this DPI aware mode does require the .NET Framework 4.7 and Windows 10 build 1703 or newer. I've touched briefly on the HTML formatting enhancement, so we do support a font tag now, allowing to specify the typeface, size, color in your markup, superscript, subscript, which is great. Data editors, let's go back to our data editor control. You can now set a read-only mode for the checklist box control, and the search lookup edit can automatically default to the first record when you press enter. There's a lot of changes happening in the background for XPO or Express Persistent Objects. There's a new server mode component, if you are using XPO, and I think it's one of those polls that we'd like to take at some point, Julian, just to find out who uses XPO, because it's been around for a long time. It's a powerful engine. We've got the ability of supporting the flyout panel as a tooltip. So here I'm showing what's known as dynamic content. In other words, a flyout panel with updating information. And I can switch that to interactive, and I can activate my timer and reset. So that is available. The camera control has got DirectX hardware acceleration support. So you can now actually, you imagine you can use our control to deliver 4K or greater performance. I remember the first time you showed the calendar control. And
I remember it too, yes.
The extra form now supports raster and vector images.
Vector.
So the actual
I'm sorry,
image, the image that's shown in the preview and things on taskbars can be a vector image. And then finally, Julian, using the behavior manager component, you can disable cells conditionally. Now this applies to the data grid, this applies to the tree list and the vertical grid. You can disable individual cells, or you can disable rows based on the conditions you want, and obviously based on the things like skin settings that are applied. Wow, 53 items. I think there's actually more. So now what we'll do is head over and take a look at some questions.
So, I mean, the team have been in the background there answering questions while we've been, or rather, mostly Paul has been showing off some of the new features and enhancements for WinForms. So, for example, Veronica says, with the SVG Image Box, can I use it to create dynamically create SVG objects? And the answer is no, it's a display option only. You've got to have your SVG image there already, and what we're doing is we're essentially manipulating the elements inside that SVG image, like drawing a border around them or something along those lines.
Michael wanted to know what font I was using in Visual Studio.
One of those programming fonts where we have glyphs which basically join together. What was it?
Yes,
Which one was it?
Fira Code. I've posted the answer in there. It is a great little font. I use it in VS Code as well, and it's just nice to see knots and triple equals and other things look so much nicer. I think fat arrows they call in some ones, but what else have we got?
Okay, there's a whole bunch of things. Does the Gantt control? What? Go on, sorry.
No, sorry, just on the SVG one. So to be clear, the SVG Image Box supports SVG objects only. It is just for that use.
Anything more interesting? Yeah. Mark asks, is there a reason why you wouldn't want to run the pivot grid in non-optimized setting?
Well,
if you want it slower, I don't know.
The legacy mode, I think that there's certainly reasons why we've had to leave some of those things back in. So there's definitely things there.
Anything interesting?
Can we talk a little bit more on XPO server? That's
I have no extra information, I'm afraid.
You don't? Well,
No.
what we can do is there is a great blog post on the XPO update, as well as a documentation and an example. So in the What's New page, there is a link already to that information. And if you have any specific questions, then the team would love to hear from you via the support center. On the XPO component, there is also a JSON data source component allowing binding to obviously a set of REST data in JSON format, including things like the fill sync methods, again with examples and documentation. Bill Hazelwood is feeling a little tired and wants to know about the camera control. So the camera control has been optimized for use of DirectX, allowing you to basically get as high performance on your camera as is possible. So be interesting to see if Bill is using it's sometimes interesting reading comments. We won't read the second one out for you, Bill, I promise. Long live Silverlight. No.
Silverlight? No.
So again, the SVG image editor does not support creating, only loading and interaction with existing items. Now Mike asked a good question on the grid cell. Can you change the color of a bar at a different percentage and using custom events? Yes, you can. So effectively what he's asking there is at X percent I want this color, Y percent I want this color. And that can be done with a custom draw or custom event. Bob Anson asked if we're going to be offering a chat control. Not at this time. But again, we are looking for different usage scenarios.
I'd say the chat control would be more of a web-related thing rather than WinForms related, maybe?
Well, I think
Just
as long as you're going to
it.
use something like Signal R as the middle piece, I mean, there are, I can think of use cases where you've got an existing legacy application, you want to add that functionality, you're not going to go to the web, but you'd use Signal R to handle the real-time comms.
Maybe. Well, I must admit that most of the chat applications I use would tend to be, you've bought a product from someone online and it's not the one you want, and so you open up a chat window from their website kind of thing. But I suppose, when you're thinking about Skype, that's an application, an actual desktop application. Let me think about that.
Julian's going to write a demo. That's all good. I'll take the tick off for answer questions. And is there anything else you want to go through, Mr. Bucknall?
No, I think the team have done pretty well, and I think we're at the 1 hour mark. So let's welcome Amanda back.
And remind everybody to register for the rest of the webinars.
I will do that, Paul. I'm assuming I missed you saying this, but did you answer the question of when did we officially release?
Oh, we
minus 3 days
last
ago.
Friday. Yeah, minus 3 days ago. Last Friday morning, we released version 19.2, DevExpress Universal, all the individual pieces, so DevExpress WinForms as well. So it's all been released, apart from the VCL side, which is in, say, 3 weeks' time. He says, off the cuff.
Tentatively.
Tentatively.
All right. Like I mentioned before, today's webinar will be made available later on our DevExpress YouTube channel. I will post that link in the chat box. And as Paul mentioned, we do have several 19.2 launch webinars coming up this week. This was just the first. You can visit devexpress.com/webinars to sign up today. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Paul and Julian. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.